We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and by hook or by crook, getting those questions this week. Holy smokes! My apologies to Tom. I ruined his whole weekend. Not for like completely frivolous reasons, but I was not receiving any of the question@avrant.com emails to my email address that we forward all those things to. It's a problem that has cropped up in the past, but like different, like one was Gmail and that stopped working one time, so we started using Outlook, and then my Outlook stopped working this time, sent it back to Gmail, now that's working. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. Tom, I don't think you actually like know. Like, as far as we can tell, it's either something on my end that I can't find, or
it's never not worked for mine.
I don't know what it is. Anyway, I think
I blame Canada, just
indeed,
like everybody should.
Indeed, yes. I think we managed to gather up all the questions for this week, but if you are listening and you're like, hey, I don't hear my name, I don't hear my question, nothing was mentioned, and I certainly sent something, please send it again. That goes for all ways, but especially right now, we know we had email problems throughout this past week. So apologies for that. Apologies to Tom. I wasted too much of his time, but there we go. We're here.
We are here.
Yes.
I guess we're going to start with a special announcement.
Okay.
Other than that special announcement. Over at the Brightside Home Theater Podcast, and this past Tuesday, as we're recording this, GJ has a special interview with Roseanne and her husband Mike. Roseanne is a survivor of the Boston Marathon bombing. Remember that a couple of years back?
Oh, yes.
And they are working to raise funds for the Heather Abbott Foundation, which helps to provide custom prosthesis to people who have lost limbs through traumatic circumstances. I actually have a friend who's, and this is, I don't even know why. It's just like saying that I know somebody in California when you meet somebody from California. But
sure.
I have a friend whose dad used to build those custom ones for people, and that was his whole job for years and years. As they often do, SVS has generously donated a pair of Prime Wireless Pro speakers that Brightside Home Theater will be raffling off. All proceeds from the raffle will be going to the Heather Abbott Foundation, and the details for entering the raffle are mentioned during DJ's podcast, and I hope he's put them someplace in a show note or something.
I didn't spot it just from the placeholder thing for like this is all happening as we're recording this, so I don't have all the finalized stuff just yet. But we'll have a link in our show notes over to Brightside Home Theater. The details are all there. We're absolutely happy to mention that on our podcast because I mean, hey, even if you don't care about anything else besides winning a pair of Prime Wireless Pro speakers for yourself, you can enter the raffle. But this is a very good cause. Causes like this, I certainly am happy to support. DJ's a friend of ours, so check out Brightside Home Theater Podcast. This week's episode that went up on Tuesday, and that should be a good interview. I haven't heard it yet because as we're recording this, it's just coming out today. But it's that's going to be a good thing to support. So Heather Abbott Foundation, if you want to go directly, and there we go. Brightside Home Theater Podcast. Check it out.
All right, Rob, what did you watch this weekend?
Okay, yeah. So I have been watching the NHL playoffs, which most of my time has been spent on that. It's been very fun. Good first bracket going on here. So that's been a lot of fun. But I did scratch out just slightly less than an hour of my time, because that's about all I had, to check out Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always. It is their 30th anniversary? Yeah, since that came out, the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and so this is...
Is it a movie? What is this?
Well,
what is this thing?
I mean, it's just under an hour, so it's kind of hard to... I mean, technically, that could still qualify as a full-length feature. I mean, what I would call it is what would have been a 3-part episode, in the past. That's basically what this is. And so, here's the fun part of it. They brought back 2 of the very original cast members.
So Tommy and somebody else.
Well, no, I mean, he passed away. Jason David Frank passed away.
Oh, did he? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to trigger anybody.
Indeed,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So he, and that was quite recently. So he was actually alive when they were filming this, but he was not a part of it. So it is David Yost, who played Billy, the original Blue Ranger, he's back. And Walter Jones, who played the original Black Ranger, he's back. And they are definitely like the 2 stars of this as the original members. And then they brought in, who was it? Catherine Sutherland, who played Kat, the second Pink Ranger. And, oh man, I'm forgetting the dude's name who played Rocky, the second Red Ranger. So as far as original cast, that's who's back. They got back the original voice of Rita. They got back the original voice of Alpha 5.
Alpha 5 was the robot?
He was the robot. He was the little robot.
Okay.
Who's now Alpha 9, because, time has passed. 30 years have passed. But
Rita sounded like she was 100 years old when she was doing that voice. I can imagine how old she is now.
The actress who's doing the English dub.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, this is all kind of taking place in canon, because, the Power Rangers saga, has nothing to do with the original Japanese footage, the Super Sentai.
Sure.
They completely changed all the stories when they anglicized it and brought it over to North America. But it's all taking place within the Power Rangers canon. But I kind of loosely so, because a bunch of stuff doesn't entirely line up with things that have taken place over 30 years of various Power Rangers series. But honestly, I want to give a huge amount of credit to what they did, because they were very clear on the tone that they were going for, which is, this is exactly like the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers show. It is every bit as cheesy. It is every bit as it could easily just slot into that original series. It does not feel different, except it is a bit more, it's almost like a very special episode, because it is dealing with the death of the original Yellow Ranger, Tui Trang, who passed away many years ago. That was just shortly after the series ended. She died in a car accident, the actress. Now, they never, in canon, killed off her character, Trini, the original Yellow Ranger. So, in this, this was all in the promos and everything, Trini dies, the Yellow Ranger dies, and so that it's largely just a tribute to her, a tribute to Tui Trang. And then at the very end, they tribute Jason David Frank as well, which honestly made this a whole lot sadder and more somber than you ever would have expected for something from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And they handled it very respectfully. So despite it being more mature in that sense, the way, they're like, no, we're going to shoot this exactly like an original episode. We're going to script it exactly like an original episode, except dealing with, a little bit darker and heavier material. So it's like they aged it up for people exactly like me, who were kids when it originally came out. They aged it up that way, but kept it the exact same feel. The poor guy who plays Rocky, who was always a terrible actor and never could deliver his lines, he hasn't gotten any better, or else he realized that's how bad he used to be and just delivered it the same way, because, oh man,
Let's go with that one.
Stand out.
Let's go with he's doing it on purpose now. He's actually a Shakespearean actor.
Stands out like holy crap, man, that guy cannot deliver a line. and they severely limited anything he had to say. But it's I was kind of shocked at how well they balanced everything that way. Look, if you always thought Power Rangers was unwatchable for how cheesy it is, nothing has changed that way. This is a huge nostalgia hit. It really reminded me of doing a higher resolution remaster of a video game, where it's everything about the guts of the video game and how it plays and everything is exactly the same. It just all looks a little bit cleaner. Not better, it's the same graphics as it ever was, but everything's just, it's 1080p now, it's widescreen now. It isn't like the original Japanese PAL footage that they converted over. Everything was originally shot in this. So it's everything got up-resed, but feels exactly the same, and yet has this little bit more mature bent to it. And honestly, Walter Jones and David Yost both performed really, really well. They've elevated their acting a bit. So I give a big, if you were a fan of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers at all, you definitely have to check it out. And yeah, it was surprisingly heartfelt. There we go. So
I feel like this is more words than this thing deserved, but we're here
almost
now.
Certainly. Well, it's done now. And then I will just say, yes, finished off Picard season 3. That is supposedly the last we will see of that. And what was funny here is it was basically almost everybody who was a fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation was pretty darn happy with the finale of that show. The end of season 7 was all good things. The end of that show everyone was pretty happy with it. And then all the Next Generation movies happened, and some of them were okay, and a lot of them weren't very good, and people were kind of like, I don't really like where the Next Generation crew ended as far as the movies went. This basically, Picard Season 3 is like, you know what? Let's just get back to the ending that everybody liked, and that's where we're gonna end this crew. We're gonna like undo all the stuff that people didn't like from the movies. We're gonna put them all back like where they were when we were happy with the ending, and we're gonna end it there again. It's like, okay, I'm fine with that. It was pretty enjoyable. I got a kick out of it.
All right. Well, I did finish the last. I guess I didn't realize last week when I was talking about the Mandalorian and it was the last episode was coming up. So
that's right.
I did watch the last episode. Still, I think the series is. I still think that's the best series. They actually, and I understand that there's a 4th season coming at least. I don't know.
Oh, why not? I mean,
but I felt like they left it just perfectly. So they go, you know what? This guy, Pedro Pascal, is like way too expensive these days to keep putting him in a helmet the entire time.
Actually, did we see his face at all this season?
No.
I don't think we did.
No, that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
That was the whole start of the season was that he was trying to get back to his Mandalorian roots where he doesn't take his helmet off anymore.
No, I know, but they always found an excuse to show us Pedro Pascal's face at least once during the season in the previous season.
Not the first season, I didn't think.
First season we saw him at the end there. Yeah, he took his, in front of IG-11. That was the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. I forgot about that. But then he did it again when he was on like that star base or whatever, the Empire.
That was the second season. Yeah, we saw his face quite a bit more in the second season.
Yeah, this time they were like, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So, I mean, and he could just do voiceover, though. I think it is harder to act inside of a suit like that than you can
I don't know if he was ever physically there. I mean, he doesn't really have to be if we never see his face. And then, he's off filming The Last of Us now, so who knows if there was conflicts there and voice was all they could get. So, yeah. I
felt, if it's another actor in there, that's great. I don't care who's in there. It doesn't really matter to me. The voice and the acting, as long as they match up, that's all that matters. And I felt like whoever was in there, if it wasn't him, they had the same body mannerisms.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's like 3, there's a couple of stunt guys and another stand-in. I'm pretty sure there's at least 3 people besides Pedro Pascal who have been in the outfit.
So they ended it where they definitely didn't have to have another season.
No, that could have easily been a series finale. It felt like one. It was satisfying.
Yeah, it was just fine, and I thought the end of it was fine. I thought everything was good.
While telling what are these two going to do? So
yeah. So I felt like this was if we want to write a book series after this one to tell the tales of them, that would be
comics.
Fine.
I'm sure
have any more actual episodes. I think this is my favorite season.
Okay.
I think that it was the best one by far, even though Jack Black and Lizzo tried the damnedest to mess it up as far as I was concerned. But I felt overall that this was very well done. It's got a lot of stuff, a lot of meat in there where you're like, well, where's the next season going to go? Could it go with more Mando Grogu stuff? Could we do more Mandalorian stuff? Could we do the weird thing living underneath the water stuff?
Yes.
I mean, we could do all kinds of stuff here.
I think it would be all of the above.
And the First Order too. You can see how the First Order is starting to grow out of this series. This is by far the best for me. This is the best quote unquote Star Wars thing that they've put out. Even though Andor was great, and I very much liked a lot of what they did with what was the animated one where it was like 2 episodes? It was like Star Wars Tales or something like that. I don't remember what it was called.
Tales of the Jedi?
Tales of the Jedi, which I thought was also very good. I'm very interested to see what they're going to do with Thrawn when Thrawn starts showing up here.
That should be fun.
But you can see, for me, this feels more Star Wars than Andor did.
Yes.
Andor feels like something in the Star Wars setting, but not necessarily with the same feel to it.
Yeah.
This felt much more like so if you're looking for something a little bit lighter, more Western-y feeling.
Absolutely.
A little more action-packed. Yeah. This is Space Western with, laser swords. It's like D&D sci-fi. This is, I think this is definitely a great season to
I mean,
catch,
if there
you
isn't
catch nothing
some
else.
hint of Din Djarin and Grogu showing up in Ahsoka, I'll be a bit surprised. But
I think Ahsoka looks great too.
It looks like it's just one of those things. Like now that these characters are so popular, like maybe not as much as they were in Book of Boba Fett, but I would be a little surprised if they don't at least show up at some point in the Ahsoka series.
You know, I think one of my favorite scenes in all of the Mandalorian, at least season 3, is there's and I don't remember what episode it happens in, but he's on that planet with what's his name? Not Lando. What's it? Yeah,
Cargo?
right? Yeah, him.
Yeah.
Right. So he's there, and these pirates show up, and they're trying to start some stuff, right? And instead of, hey, I'm the main character, I'm gonna start talking here and start threatening people, he just kind of leans against a wall.
He did a very Mandalorian thing, yes.
Yeah, and then just kind of like hangs back and and just
he's the
waits.
silent
And I was
gunslinger in the background. Very Western.
I just thought, that's it. That's
That's
good
what we
writing.
want.
That's good directing. That's good that's good for the character. Like that's what the character should be doing.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that they're the main character. Sometimes the main character doesn't talk. They just stand back and be the main character, and you just kind of look at him out of the side of your corner. He's going to do something. He's going to do something, right? And he did do something. So I very much like it. But I watched almost nothing else this week.
Okay.
I watched that episode, and then I watched a whole lot of bike racing because I was trying to fall asleep. And
I watch hockey. You watch bike racing. That's
if you want to fall asleep, watch cycling. 6 hours, especially the real long men's races. 6 hours of jack all happening. A bunch of people pedaling on real expensive bikes.
Yep.
And every once in a while somebody falls down and you're like, oh, something happened. And then you can take another 2-hour nap. Is the least exciting. I mean, I as much as I like cycling, boy, that's tough to watch. That's a tough watch. That's
and
tough
yet,
to sit through.
apparently, you watched hours upon hours.
Well, I was really trying. I mean, the other thing is that you can talk straight through it. So my wife comes in and she wants to sit down and talk, and we'll talk straight through it, and that's fine. So I did watch a lot of that.
Okay.
All right, let's get to this podcast where we answer people's home theater and AV questions. It's AVRant. Get your question answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by sending an email to question@avrant.com.
And crossing your fingers. Us too.
Hoping. Because believe me, if I have to do another Sunday where my entire day gets completely hosed because I'm on tech support, and it turns out it's just Rob's email anyways.
Although we still haven't figured out why.
We don't know why.
Brutal.
It doesn't matter. It's Canada. It's something to do with the export.
Something's
tax.
going on there. But anyway,
there's
for the moment, I have been receiving questions that came in since Sunday.
I'm forwarding it to so many emails at this point that it should be.
It should make it to one of them.
I might be considered spam. Like I might just like that whole account might be considered spam at this point. Like every email, Rob's like, try this one, try this one, try this one. I'm just trying them all. They're all in there now. So
2 of them work.
question@avrant.com. You can go to our website and find our episode notes as well as our Flickr albums, so you can follow along with the pictures that we'll be talking about. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. Contact Rob directly.
Hopefully.
Maybe.
Fingers crossed.
Maybe.
Potentially.
Might work.
It might.
Rob
I'm pretty sure I
AVRant.com.
missed some, honestly, this past
Mine
week.
works because I ordered some more cycling clothes because I'm apparently the Imelda Marcos of cycling clothes these days. And I got an email at tom@avrant.com. No problem. So rob@avrant.com's Twitter's @FirstReflect. I'm tom@avrant.com, as I mentioned. Let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, come to the website and support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to the website and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which will send you to a PayPal donation site, and where you can give us a PayPal donation with either your PayPal account or a credit card. And we want to thank Chad for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Chad.
Yeah, we haven't had a PayPal in a while, so that's very nice. Chad, thank you for the monetary support. That's very nice of you. Any amount you please, paypal.com. You can also do a automatic recurring donation via PayPal if that's the way you'd like to do it. So thank you very much for that.
And if you're not down for doing a reoccurring donation from PayPal, you can do it from Patreon. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where we have 137 patrons, including Bill, who they all get a little bit of money taken. Well, their money taken from them, and most of it comes to us. I think the minimum of is $1.
That's right.
So thank you very much to our patrons.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Just like Tom said, that's where you go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thanks to our 137 patrons over there. Bill, thank you for being one of them.
If you can't support us financially, support us in some other way, and we'll mention you here. One of the ways you can do that is sending us stuff or whatever. And Greg shipped a Harmony Hub and remote for Rob for his parents to use, for Rob's parents to use, along with some surprise items. So, snakes.
It has not arrived as of the recording of this.
Maybe snakes. Could be tarantulas.
It could be. This was mentioned, I think, end of last year, but Greg was moving at the time. That's the reason that he's not going to be using that anymore. He's like, yeah, I'm still unpacking here in April. I'm like, yeah, I hear you, dude. I'm still unpacking from when I had the flood back last August. So, I know all about that. I completely understand, but that's very nice. He sent me the shipping tracking number, which does show it on the move, so something's coming my way, and thank you, Greg, for doing that.
Cockroaches.
Could be.
Came from Florida. It gets cockroaches,
no
whether
kidding.
you like it or not. There's gonna be a bug in there. It might be a gator or something. Who knows? We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through whatever terrible thing is going on in the universe right now, including from the Lit Lion. That's a person?
That's all I had. I didn't have a name signed off at the end of the email, so I just went with what showed up in the email header. This is with our broken email where Tom had to forward everything to me as attachments. So that's the name I have. If that's you, thank you.
I mean, that just sounds drug related, but okay. Lit Lion. Maybe he's just.
What else am I supposed to put
a lion on fire? Is it a lion on fire? That feels abusive. I don't think we should light lions on fire.
Should not.
Though, I mean, let's be honest, that'd make a pretty cool picture, though. AI generated picture, mind you. Speaking of which, I started using AI to generate photos for AV gadgets.
Yep.
Stuff for AV gadgets.
That's what a lot of people are doing.
It's first of all,
good.
This one's not. There's a bunch that you can pay for that are expensive and that do really, really, really photorealistic and everything else. I'm using Bing.
Okay. Yeah.
So not as good. And if you tell it, today I asked for an on-off switch and it cannot spell on or off consistently, and oftentimes it's very strange. Anyways, so yes, you can. It can do some things, and I usually manipulate the pictures afterwards and add things to them. But and people are like, oh, that you don't. It's not. There's no copyright. But I don't care. To grab the pictures from my website and use them on other things. What do I care? What do I care?
Oh, I see on that end. No, I was more thinking the way it's been trained was often on copyrighted material where those people aren't getting any payment for, because it has been altered, sometimes often drastically altered, but the thing wouldn't exist if it didn't have the training data. It's a big problem. Right. It's all being fought in the courts. It's all coming up.
We're going to see what happens with this whole thing.
All of this from one person's email name. There we go.
Yeah, lit. See what you've started? It's your fault. We also got notes of gratitude from Bill, who's part of the 2 Hour Plus Club, Stefan, Gurinder. And Gurinder says he tried VR for the first time, a VR escape room with his kids. That was a mistake. Yeah. He'd certainly do it again, but maybe with adults next time. They only solved one puzzle. Also, he enjoyed watching the menu, which Rob mentioned last week. He also noticed the makeup, which Rob talked about.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be that obvious. Her character was supposed to be out of place, so maybe it was intentional. It's hard to tell. I got that from David, who tested out that scene from The Mandalorian that bottomed out my subwoofers last week. David's also using dual SVS PC12 NSD cylinders. He didn't get any bottoming out or distortion, even at full reference volume. He tried pushing 3 dB above reference, though, and that got the little red lights on the subs to flash, indicating their limiters had activated. So maybe the limiters on my subs aren't working. Also, David doesn't listen to any other podcasts, just AVRant. So around his house, we are simply known as The Podcast.
The Podcast. The one and only. It's very nice.
Singular.
That's right.
Capitalize. Eric, Karl, Ron, and Brian as well. So the Lit Lion, Bill, Stefan, Gurinder, David, Eric, Karl, Ron, and Brian, thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time so they came from my lips. The Lit Lion, whoever you might be. Bill, Stefan, Gurinder, David, Eric, Karl, Ron, and Brian. Thank you all very much for sending in those notes of gratitude. The notes of encouragement are definitely appreciated. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
Maybe the Lit Lion is just a bunch of mice that banded together to form a collective. They wear a trench coat so that people can't tell
all
what
in
they
a trench
are.
coat. Always a trench coat.
It's always a trench coat because that's not at all conspicuous. So weird. In the news, over at avgadgets.com, a website well known for its hard-hitting journalism and biting editorials.
Must be.
Never, ever having a spelling mistake ever.
You got one person looking at it, so.
Andrew posted his 1 year later update to his Sofabaton X1 review. That'll be the last review until update until something major happens with that thing. Because I asked him to do a 1 year update, and then I told him he didn't have to do it anymore. And he didn't have to do it to begin with. But whatever. Well, so in short, the team at Sofabaton has continued to roll out updates. Things have improved, but it still isn't a match for the old Harmony Elite, particularly when it comes to integrating it with whole house automation and voice assistance. But Andrew isn't nearly as down on it as as the sort of general online consensus, which seems to revel in hating on the Sofabaton X1. The process of adding home theater devices via the app has improved. Everything is less buggy, but yes, you still have to be willing to spend some time setting up your activities. And no, it isn't as good as the last of the Harmony remotes. Andrew makes it clear in this review and in his updates that A/B comparing the last iteration of a Harmony remote to the very first hub-based remote that Sofabaton has put out isn't exactly a fair comparison. Not only that, the size of the companies and the depth of their pocketbooks when it came to developing these things.
That's right.
It's not a fair comparison. And if my news feed has any indication, people only click on negative headlines. They because I cannot get, like, I keep telling Google I don't want to read anything about or from certain sources that where it's nothing but, so and so turned down this $700 million blockbuster thing to go do, and then you can't read the rest of it because it gets cut off.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, just stop with all the negativity. Listen to what fans are hating on the new Lilo and Stitch. Look at whatever. I'm like, how who are these fans and how are they hating so much on things? Like one tweet? Is it like a couple of people on Reddit going, oh, it kind of looks kind of weird? Who cares? Okay, stop clicking on the negative stuff so they'll stop writing it. And I see people all the time slamming Sofabaton on Reddit and then suggesting finding a Harmony. I'm like, where? Yeah. Where are you supposed to find these There are a finite number of them, and they're getting more and more expensive by the day. Right. You cannot just be negative on everything and then suggest people do a thing that they can't do. This is the option that's out there, and it might not be as good. Yeah, but
I would have to say that
you can buy it.
I find the Sofabaton X1, as long as you are willing to sort of limit the scope of what you're going to do, right? If you want this to control your whole house automation, I don't think that this is the solution. Just flat out, that's not what you want to do. Honestly, I don't really think the Harmony remotes were the solution for whole house automation. It was just that. They were much more capable than anything else that you could get for just a few $100s as a consumer. And the next step up is several thousands of dollars in almost any case for a whole house solution. So the Harmonies were remarkable in terms of how much they could do for a few $100s, including whole house automation. The Sofabaton X1, while it has a few little hooks into things like Philips Hue lights and, a few of the motorized shades and things like that, it isn't a whole house automation solution. And the people who are disappointed in that, I understand, but if you can wrap your head around that and be like, as far as controlling TVs, AV receivers, sound bars, right? Home theater equipment, the stuff you would normally control with a remote in your hand, I think it actually does a pretty decent job. But it is definitely the case, like, if I just went by the default, what do I end up with when I used the setup software of the old Harmony remotes to just automatically generate the activities? Myself, I was never 100% satisfied with that because I always wanted to customize some of the buttons and pages and things like that. But you did end up at the end of just running through the Harmony wizard with a pretty darn usable remote. Right? You could do nothing else in terms of customization. The buttons might not be exactly where you want them, but like you could use it right after running that wizard. Whereas with the Sofabaton X1, my opinion is, you got to do more manual setup than that. To get the activities, just the activities to actually work, running through just the basic wizard setup in the app doesn't get you to a usable place yet because it doesn't populate anything on that screen by default. And you've got to have some things on that screen to make your activity useful. So it's not as slick as the Harmony setup, but I think it's pretty okay. And I think Andrew agrees, having read through his review.
Well, the other thing, too, is, and this is the last thing I'm going to say on this subject for today. No one remembers how much they hated on Harmony not working the way they wanted
the first
it to work
ones,
when the Harmony was out.
This as their first activity-based remote versus the first Harmony activity-based remotes, the X1 is better than the first Harmonies were.
Well, even then, Harmony has never been. Remember when the Harmony hub system first came out, you had to say to she who shall not be named, you had to say your Echo Dot or whatever. You had to tell it to tell your Harmony to do the thing, which was clunky and weird. Yeah. Right? It took them a long time to work that part out as well. And this was a massive company that has, a lot more resources than somebody like...
A lot of that was on Amazon's side at the time, so it's not as though Logitech could fix that for them. So, yeah, it's taken time.
So let's not forget that, just because you got used to using this other remote, now you're reading, because believe me, a lot of these people complain about it, never touched it, are reading the specs and reading what other people are saying it can and can't do and going, oh, it's complete crap. Yeah. 99% of people use it to control their home theater and literally, or not even their home theater, their TV and their cable box and their, Blu-ray player or something that. And that's it. That's all they use it for. And believe me, for that, this is good. This is just, this is good.
I think it's pretty good, darn good for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's some quick Netflix news. September 29th, 2023 will be the final day of sending out physical discs by mail. DVD.com, a Netflix company, is closing down 25 years after Netflix mailed its first red envelope on March 10th, 1998. The $7 a month basic with ads tier gets a nice little upgrade without any price increase. Basic with ads will now stream in 1080p resolution rather than 720p, and you can watch on two screens at once instead of only one. Still no downloads, and some content still isn't available. So... whatever.
Okay, so Netflix is streaming only as of the end of September of this year. That is it for physical discs in the mail. I'm kind of like, in my head, I'm like, okay, so that's the last day they're going to mail any discs out. Do they expect to ever get those back?
Like a whole bunch of discs.
There were never...
Sign up on the 9th and then be like, I'm good.
There were never any late fees, and you never actually had to return that. Like, they wouldn't send you any more discs from your queue until you sent something back. But I'm like, if these are the last ones ever going out, I guess they're just saying goodbye to those discs, right?
Well, what else are they going to do with them?
What else?
I don't know. Is there going to be anybody there to receive the mail? Like, just hang out outside the warehouse and watch them stack up every morning. Come by with like a garbage can and just
that does seem like a potential hack that many people are going to think of. Just send me a bunch of discs at the very end and I get to keep them. It seems like it's what's going to happen. But then, over on the streaming side, they're making the basic with ads a little bit nicer to use, 1080p and two screens at once. So a little bit more usable on the streaming side if you're willing to watch some ads.
So Amazon Prime Video has begun offering Dialogue Boost as an option on a handful of its English language Prime original shows and movies. Amazon says they're using AI.
Of course they are. I mean, are they allowed to say they're not?
Can we just all admit right now that AV manufacturers are in the process of printing up millions of powered by AI stickers to slap on the next round of AV receivers that they put out?
Oh, heaven.
Because that's what they're going to call it. It's like powered by Audyssey AI. powered by Dirac AI. It's not AI. It's an algorithm. They're boosting certain frequencies. It's not brain surgery. This is not AI. I refuse to admit or even agree that could be the... Anyways. Amazon says they're using AI, and the processing is taking place on the server side, allowing them to offer dialogue boost as a simple language option on any and all streaming devices. It isn't just a simple center channel boost. They claim their AI processing analyzes the audio and selectively enhances dialogue and or reduces background music and effects only in scenes where it detects that it will be difficult to make out what people are saying. Wow, that sounds a lot like compression to me. To be honest with you, that sounds an awful lot like MP3 compression. You know, I'm not on that side. Maybe I'm AI. Have you guys ever thought of that?
That's right.
This stunning physique of mine, these chiseled features that you're seeing on YouTube right now. Clearly, I'm AI. They expect to expand the option to more shows and movies throughout the rest of the year. What a load of crap. Okay, let me just put that out there. It's a load of crap. It's just and not only that's the boost. I think isn't really going to do much, but cutting back on the reducing the background level of other things like the music and stuff like that could possibly help. But the real issue has always been and will continue to always be slap echo, and people were like, I don't understand why I can't understand the dialogue. No matter how loud I turn it, I still can't understand it. Okay, so if no matter how loud you turn it, you can't understand it, what makes you think that boosting just the dialogue is going to make it any better? The problem is your room. It's always been your room. It's going to continue to be your room. Stop it.
Once in a while, we do just have actors who are just outright mumbling as well.
That is true. I mean,
happens.
I have children. I do understand that mumbling is a thing.
But
yes.
having listened to like some people in the industry, like sound engineers in the industry, talking about like what is the real cause for not being able to make out what people are saying, and they're like, yeah, a lot of times when we're recording this stuff, like sound is just way down on the priority list for a lot of directors, and what is captured on set is horrible. Then you go in and you do the dialogue replacement, but that doesn't always get a lot of time and money, and like there's a lot that happens on the production side. So then that brings up, okay, well, if that's the case, and this is happening on the production side, is something that the consumer can selectively, optionally activate. I mean, is that a bad thing? I'm not going to say it's a bad thing to have it when it's an option, all right? If it's an option and if I can listen to it the way it was originally mastered, and that's the default, and then I have the option to apply whatever the heck processing I want to it, I'm fine with that. Because as long as it's optional and I can always get back to what was originally mastered, then that's A-okay by me. But in terms of like, I don't want to see the industry trying to rely on this and deprioritizing audio even more on the production side of things, being like, oh, well, people are going to watch this on our streaming service and they'll apply whatever processing after the fact, and we can pay even less money and time and attention to the audio side of things than we already are. So I wouldn't be happy about that. But yeah, I can see both sides of this. And honestly, as long as it's an option, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, we'll see what they actually end up doing.
That's right.
Those who don't care about audio are going to continue to not care about audio, and they probably won't care about this any more than they don't care about audio to begin with. People who do care about audio, aren't going to care less about audio because they're mixing it for their ears anyways, or they're recording it for their ears anyway. So as they're going through the dailies or whatever that they go through, as they're listening, like, I can't hear any of this crap. Let's fix that. Or read the scene or redo the audio, or they're going to care about that up front. I don't see them starting to care less because, when they stream it, it'll be okay. These actors, directors and sound engineers, stuff like that, they care, there's a whole, like what Rob just said, there's a whole bunch of people out there who I think honestly believe that people are trying to do the worst job possible.
Right.
And I don't think
it's not that. Yeah.
It's most. I don't think that's the case. I don't think people
time
are like
and money.
The time and money thing I get, and maybe there'll be less time and money spent on or potentially less time and money. But I think that the people who care are going to care no matter what, and the people that don't care are going to not care no matter what. I don't think that this is going to make a difference on the production side. I do think it'll make a difference on on giving people, they'll have the option to use it. And I mean, they just have one more person to complain to when they can't understand dialogue. Like,
That's right.
Used your boost and it didn't do anything. Well, your room sucks. Well, no one's gonna understand that. I'm like, well, we did our best, whatever. Got some comments here. Herb from Cross-Spectrum Acoustics says they do not recommend annual measurement mic recalibrations, which is what I suggested. Somebody asked how often you should do it, and I said every year.
Right.
Because that's the last piece of information I got about it, which is probably 5 years or more old. He says for today's mics, it really isn't necessary. Even in their own in-house microphones, they recalibrate at 18-month or 2-year intervals, and legally speaking, even that isn't necessary. For consumers with mics like the UMIC 1, he'd say not to even think about recalibration until at least the 4 to 5 year mark, and even then he's remeasured mics from 2010, and there's essentially been no drift. I find that not at all shocking, since that mic has probably been sitting in the box for...
That's right.
4.9 of those 5 years. Now, if the mic has been dropped a bunch of times or left in a super hot or cold environment, or it's obviously been giving weird results, maybe have it checked. But otherwise, honestly, don't worry about it. He does come across professional equipment with annual calibration requirements. Most of those date back to the 70s and 80s. Tolerances weren't as good, or there are analog circuits that can potentially drift. In his experience, equipment has improved in the past 25 years. Annual calibrations really aren't necessary, although old habits die hard. Good to know. Good to know.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was very happy to receive that from Herb. Always top-notch information from him. Anything to do with the professional side of measuring acoustics, the man knows his stuff. So, that was great. Happy to correct ourselves on that. Good to know. And I mean, yes, I think we were much more in agreement than disagreement, because we were like, yeah, don't worry about your UMIC 1. I'm sure it's fine unless something is obviously wrong with it. And Herb definitely confirmed that part of things.
All right. Yeah. And again, I probably heard that 1 year thing, 10 years ago or something. Like that.
Graciously there, her pointed out, like, yeah, it's not as though there aren't things where they say have it checked every year. He's like, yeah, there definitely are. Just for a measurement mic, not that.
Yeah, your home theater, the microphones that you use at home, and like I said, if you're not abusing them, I don't see why they would change. But whatever. From Patrick, last week a listener, Nick, was asking about wireless earbuds that also provide hearing protection. We missed mentioning an option that was reviewed by our good friend Clint DeBoer over at Pro Tool Reviews. He gave a favorable review to the ISOTunes free. I'm sure they're not free. I don't know what they're called.
They're just wireless, so they named them free. All caps.
All caps on the free.
Yeah.
Wireless earphones, they go for $110, so they fit the budget that was requested, and they are ANSI, ANSI approved, and OSHA, ANSI certified and OSHA approved. Patrick bought some thanks to Clint's review, and he's been happy with them. So there's another option for you right there.
That's right. Thank you very much, Patrick, for sending that in.
Peter also wanted to offer a wireless earbud solution with hearing protection. The Walker's Silence 2.0 Bluetooth headphones, which are designed for shooting. Well, let me tell you about the things I would not have Googled when looking for earbuds. Shooting makes total sense, but it never would have come
sense.
Up.
You want some hearing protection?
I apparently went to high school with like the best shooter in California, like skeet shooter or something like that. I had no idea until much later. And they're intelligent electronic noise suppression that quiets sudden, loud noises, but can also amplify quieter sounds that regular earbuds would block out. So, like I said, when we talked about this, I'm like, you would need something very specialized, designed for a very special purpose in order to do what our friend wanted them to do, which was to stop the clanging noise as he dropped the weights onto another weight. And specialized things cost a lot, and these headphones, the Walker Silencer 2.0 silencer, just got that because it's a shooting thing.
That's right.
$320.
Yeah.
$320.
So they're not fitting that $100 target in terms of the price, but in terms of the performance for pretty much exactly what he was asking for these things to do, these sound like they very much might fit the bill.
And I we've talked about this so many times on this podcast, but it bears repeating. Think about AV receivers. If you just want the AV receiver to do very specific things and nothing else, it's more expensive.
It actually costs more, that's right.
Than it is to get something that does like everything. Okay? And this is the same here with this particular type of problem this guy is trying to solve, which isn't common. People aren't looking for headphones that just deaden very sharp, very quick noises. They want, overall noise suppression. Lastly, Gabriel and another has another hearing protection suggestion from the shooting world. He suggests the SureFire Sonic Defender earplugs. Okay, listen, shooter guys, not everything has to sound like it's actually attaches to your
they
gun.
want you to know.
Yeah, just in case you were wondering that if these are gunly enough to stick into your ears while you're holding a gun, and they won't just like fall out because they're
like how everything targeted at gamers has to have RGB in it for whatever reason.
Or a lowercase I someplace.
There you go.
Anyways, these are passive earplugs and not earphones, but they're designed to let normal sounds pass through while sudden loud noises are reduced, and they will definitely stay put in your ears. They go for about $20. So there you go. You can do $320 or you can do $20. Those these
ones don't play any music. These just protect your hearing.
There you go.
We did also get another quite lengthy email on this topic, but that came in just this morning, so we'll talk about that next week. I just didn't want that person to be like, how come we didn't mention it? It came in a little bit too late for me to have it on the topic list. But we'll talk about it next week.
We'll see who that is.
Yeah.
Paul just wanted to share this is something completely different. Finally not talking about shooting things. Paul wanted to share some of the results after installing a bunch of absorption panels from Acoustic Panels Canada in his dedicated 2-channel listening room. He's very happy with their colors and workmanship, so he'll be putting more of their panels in the home theater. He's also probably going to try one of their art panels with a nice image printed on it to go on the front wall of this listening room. So if you're on YouTube, you'll see this. If not, go to AVRant.com, click on the show notes, and then in there there'll be a Flickr album. Okay. I apologize for rubbing my nose, it itches. So these are very attractive panels, and they look very professional, and the colors match pretty well with the paint he did.
Pretty darn close. Yep, pretty darn close.
I won't say they were exact, but it's hard to tell because a little bit of shadow can make a big difference here.
Sure.
So yeah, but it looks pretty nice.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, this is what you want.
Pretty good.
I like
it. Good. Somebody's going to say, how come you don't have any diffusion in there? Shut up. My face is diffusion enough. That's what your answer is.
All right.
Some questions. Will is giving his 65-inch TCL 4 series to his son. You gonna adopt me?
Nah.
You're going to adopt me. Who is moving into a new apartment. That means Will gets an upgrade. He's thinking he'd like to splurge a little because his son can't have a better TV than him, because then the universe will be tilted out of balance.
Absolutely correct. That's right.
That's right. You'd have to go get the Infinity Gauntlet to write it. Realistically, a 75-inch LCD or 77-inch OLED is physically as large as you can go in this setup. His max budget is $2,500. He'll mostly be watching in the evening, and even during the day, there's no direct light hitting the TV screen. Despite his willingness to spend his max budget, if it's truly worth it, he certainly appreciates spending less if he can, said everybody all the time.
Pretty close.
There are some people out there who's like, if it doesn't cost enough, I'm not going to buy it.
That's absolutely right.
Which is crazy to me. It doesn't even make sense.
They just want the engagement online.
The reviews on a lot of 75-inch LCD TVs in his budget seem very good. Are OLEDs honestly worth their higher price tags?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
If you want a really good picture,
that's right. Yep.
I mean, if you want the best picture, they are.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, the LCDs that come closest to rivaling the OLED picture quality are very close in price as well, particularly in this size range. So, given everything that you're asking for, I would 100% say, because it really would be like a few $100 difference, absolutely get the OLED.
When it comes to specific OLED models, if he goes for a 77-inch under $2,500, he's probably looking at the LG B2 right now, but there's also the less expensive A2. He isn't a gamer, and he doesn't even use any physical media anymore. It will all be streaming and cable TV. So would the A2 model be enough? It's significantly less expensive at the 77-inch size. He watches a wide variety of streaming services using his Apple TV 4K. Will the 60 Hz only A2 be a problem in terms of judder? What if he locks his Apple TV to only ever outputs 24 frames per second? Well, 24 doesn't go evenly into 60.
Right. So
so you got 3D pull down to begin with.
The A2 does have a like 72 hertz mode. Specifically for if you are inputting a 24 frames per second signal. So it will actually show you a judder-free image if you're, say, using a Blu-ray player, that's outputting 24 frames per second. That will show up judder-free on the A2, even though the A2 isn't doing 120 hertz. It's doing 60 hertz most of the time by default, but then it does have this 72 hertz mode specifically for 24 frames per second content. This is it's tough because, for example, one of the things that the B2 and the C2, all the 120 hertz LG OLEDs offer, which is really nice, is if you're watching cable TV, right? If you're watching cable TV, that's going to be a 60 hertz signal, whether it's 1080i or 1080p. Right. But it's going to be a 60 hertz signal coming out of your cable box into your OLED television. And the B2 and the C2, they can actually do what's called inverse telecine, which is, the show that you're watching was originally shot in camera at 24 frames per second. Then when it was broadcast, either over broadcast TV or cable TV, it was converted through a process called telecine or 3:2 conversion, where it converted that original 24 frames per second from the camera into a 60 hertz signal of some kind or other. Well, the B2 and the C2, they have the processing where they can undo that. They can do the inverse telecine and bring it back to 24 frames per second and then show you that judder free. The A2 can't do that. The A2 would just take that 60 hertz signal from broadcast television or from your cable box and show it to you at 60, including the judder that comes along with it. So if you're watching a lot of content on cable, you're going to see the judder there on the A2. If you were using a Blu-ray disc player, well then that would be fine. You could have the Blu-ray disc player output 24 frames per second, and that would show up judder free on the A2. But he's like, I don't use that. I use streaming predominantly. Well, that is hit and miss. That's honestly the bottom line, because there are some services, particularly with an Apple TV 4K, and you mentioned that specifically because I've talked about how when it comes to matching the frame rate of the original content, the Apple TV 4K basically gives you the best shot at it properly detecting and outputting it at 24 frames when the original content was 24 frames. But it doesn't do that universally across every single streaming service. Right. And he did mention that he uses a wide variety of streaming services. And I just can't guarantee that every piece of content from every streaming service is going to be judder free. There's just no way to guarantee that. It's going to be a little bit hit and miss depending on exactly which service and even exactly which piece of content you're watching from any given service. Whereas that B2 does have the ability to basically on its own detect, okay, I know this is coming in at 60 frames per second, but it can detect that the original cadence was 24 and sort of undo that judder that results as that. So if that is a really top priority for you, that it always looks as smooth as it possibly can, then it is several $100s more to get the B2, but that would basically be the advantage. The B2 is also a little bit brighter in general than the A2. The A2 is sort of the most basic of the OLED televisions that they offer, but that's what you're saving the money for. It's not quite as bright, and it has the 60 hertz thing. On the other hand, if you're like, look, Netflix, HBO Max, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, those all work fine. They all detect the 24 frames per second on the Apple TV 4K. Those are the services I mostly use, and that all looks fine. And then once in a while, I'm watching some other service, and maybe there's some judder when I do, and that doesn't really bother me very much, and I'd much rather have the several $100s in my pocket. That's where the A2 makes sense. It is not bad, but it's just not perfect.
Let me just say, I think you shouldn't get the A2.
Okay.
I don't. And then the reason being is it's never not going to bother you knowing that. You know what I mean? To me, the peace of mind, and I've said this thousands of times on this podcast, and I'll probably say it thousands more. The regret will cost you more than the actual money that you spent. Okay. And and then the next time you buy a TV, you're gonna overspend. You're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna get the best of everything because I'm not going through that again.
Sure.
So just get the one that does everything you need it to do.
Okay.
And that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying go out there and get the 120 hertz, VRR, all the low latency QMS crap. I'm not saying go
which
get all
actually
that.
the B2 can do.
But that's not why you're buying it. The same reason why you don't buy an AV receiver, because of the stuff it does that you don't need. You buy it for the stuff that it does that you do need, which is
the other side of it is like we don't know what all other setups Will has throughout his house. If he ever has any ideas of connecting more than one system to the same sources, like we don't know. We've certainly had people who want to do that stuff, and then we end up with that lowest common denominator situation where it's like, well, the B2 isn't going to hold you back on anything. It does all the things. So there is that to consider as well. But I think that's hopefully given you enough information to decide which way you want to go.
All right. Galen's wife wanted to have a TV in the sewing room. So he got her a new TV for her and hooked it up with her old Roku device. Then he got a brand new Roku Ultra for the home theater. It's plugged into his Pioneer Elite LX302 receiver, which is connected to a 75-inch LG SJ 8570 4K TV. Ever since getting the new Roku Ultra, when he uses Amazon Prime Video and goes to start streaming a show, the show starts up as a small picture, only taking up the top left corner of the screen. That's a feature, my friend. It's a feature. It's not a bug.
1-to-1 pixel mapping for 1080p on a 4K display or something, I guess.
It's it's a picture-in-picture. And the only way he's been able to fix it is to power cycle the Roku and start the show again. That usually works, but sometimes it doesn't. So do we have any idea what's going on and how to fix it? Ultra Roku. I mean, so before I would have called Rob, which I inevitably would have called Rob, is I would have gone through every single setting, not only on the Roku Ultra, but also like on the online Roku app or something, just to make sure I didn't miss something. Because this seems like a setting issue.
And yet, I mean, it's only happening with the one service.
Right, so it could be a setting in Amazon too. Or it could just be that the app is not working properly, which happens all the time with these boxes.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if your other services in your menus are showing up fine, then that indicates to me it's not a hardware problem, right? It's not a connection problem. It's not a hardware problem with the Roku Ultra itself. It's like when one particular app is misbehaving, it's like, I don't think there's much we can do besides wait for an update for that app. Because, I mean, what you're describing, like I say, it sounds like what's happening is you're probably watching something that's 1080p for whatever reason. It's outputting it 1-to-1, didn't bother to scale it up. It's, taking up a quarter of your screen in one corner, until you reset the thing, and somehow it usually figures itself back out. Yeah. So I don't really have...
Can we blame HDMI CEC? I feel like that's what we should do.
That is the only other thing I can think of is try turning off HDMI CEC, at least in the Roku Ultra, because all these stupid glitches that have been happening, and CEC seems like the problem. So that is certainly something you could try. But other than that, I don't have anything to offer besides just waiting for an update to the Amazon Prime Video app, which probably will come eventually. They do update those apps quite frequently. And it's not even usually noticeable. They don't even tell you anymore. It just happens in the background.
Yeah. So how do you know when it's time to change the needle on the turntable, he asks? Well, that's very easy. When it starts to glow.
That would be a lot of friction.
Eldritch power of of it starts to accumulate too much within the needle, it'll glow, and that's when you discard it and go for a new one. Because once it gets too powerful, things get so holographic in sound that you will be transported to a different dimension, never to be seen again. So it's a very scary thing. So yeah, if you see it glowing, toss it. Sometimes you can go to your local audiophile store, and they have special lined baggies that you can put them in, and tongs that you can use to touch them safely. But plastic gloves and regular garbage can works fine too.
So do you want to give a non-facetious answer? Or is it all on
No. I have no idea. Why would I know this? I've never used a turntable my entire life. I have when I was a kid, my parents. But they had like those little hairy ones. You know what I'm talking about? The little hairy ones.
I mean, honestly, this is one of the reasons why I think why turntable lovers love them so much, because it is this kind of mysterious. There is no hard and fast answer that tells you it's exactly time to change this thing. Because there isn't really. I mean, predominantly, it's like if you notice that high frequency detail has started to go missing, or your needle is literally just skipping in grooves, or you've lost the stereo effect. Like, those would be the audible reasons you would know. I mean, you can examine the tip of the needle with a magnifying glass, because it should, depending on the type that you got, the type of needle that you got, there are some that come down to really quite a sharp little point. Yeah. And it's not that you would necessarily notice a dulling of the point. What happens when a needle starts to get worn is that it gets lopsided. It'll be slanted more on one side than the other. And that's where there is another type of needle that is rounded on the bottom, intentionally rounded, doesn't come to a sharp point. So that's why you can't just look at the needle if you've never looked at it before under a magnifying glass and be like, oh, it's a little rounded. That must mean it needs to be replaced. No, some are intentionally a little rounded on the very bottom and don't come to a sharp point. But if you do notice that it is uneven at all, if it's a little more slanted on one side of the needle than the other, that should never be the case. The needle should always be even on both sides. So visually, that's how you would tell, basically. The other way is, I mean, if you've already replaced the needle or the cartridge yourself, they come with an expected lifespan. So if you want to just keep track that way, that is another way you can do it. Although, of course, if you're playing lots of dirty records, it'll age more quickly. So keeping your records clean,
dirty
at least
records.
Dusted. That's right. Yeah, is a help for there. But predominantly the way people tell is they're just listening to it, which makes them very happy, because, you know, that lets them say, oh, I heard it. I heard the difference.
I heard the difference.
I heard the difference.
I could tell from my wife could tell from the kitchen that something is something wrong with the needle, honey.
That's
Actually,
right.
You know what? Now that you mention it, you're right, honey. Woof.
How
How are your ears so good?
That symbol just doesn't shimmer quite the way it used to. Must be time to change the needle. So, unfortunately.
Honey, did you change your speakers? Did you move them around or something?
That's
Yeah,
right.
I did. I moved my speakers around. How could you tell from the kitchen? I don't know. I was just in here, making a bomb. Ron.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. I mean, it's all fictitious anyways.
That's true.
She might as well be in there making that. I was in here cooking the cat.
We're going to get
Is that better?
demonetized, Tom. We're going to get demonetized.
What will we do? How will we survive without all those Apple dollars from our
All the YouTube
archived
monies.
podcast?
That's Google dollars, Tom. That's Google dollars from YouTube.
Ron asks, "What's the loudest soundbar?" Just build a horn around the one you've got. It's like just take and bend some plywood and make a horn around the one you got, and it's gonna get loud. Ron has a bathroom setup that uses how big is your bathroom?
There's an image.
48-inch LG C2 OLED with all the streaming provided by an Apple TV 4K. There's a jetted tub, and when the jets are running, it drowns out the TV sound. My God. Mm-hmm. Let me change his name. Ron. First world problems. Okay, let me just fix that for you, Ron. My parents had a bathroom that was like this. It didn't have a TV in it, but they had a jet jacuzzi tub and a walk-in shower, and it was huge. The TV's built-in speakers certainly can't cut it, and he's already tried a Sonos Beam and connecting a pair of Apple HomePod mini speakers. Neither of those could be heard clearly over the tub jets. The system needs to be dead simple to use, only one remote, and as simple as turning on the TV and having everything ready to go without having to think about switching between devices or on the remote or anything. So that's why Ron figured a soundbar would be the best solution. He's willing to spend if it's necessary, but he wants good value, and he doesn't have anywhere to put a wireless subwoofer if it comes with one, so the soundbar needs to sound okay on its own. What can we suggest? That dragon thing, the
Nakamichi Dragon
soundbar. I just got an email this week that it is either starting to ship or whatever or something. Mm-hmm. It's on its way. So they specifically said they don't have any press samples to do reviews with, so I won't be able to review it.
Now that one was what, $3,500?
It was a reasonable price.
Yes. I mean, that is the answer to what is the loudest soundbar. It is the Nakamichi Dragon. Now, as it turns out, if you don't want to spend upwards of $3,500, I'm pretty sure that was the price point on the Dragon. Nakamichi's Soundwave. I'm not sure why that was the name, but that's what they're called. Soundwave sound bars are basically the loudest of pretty normal consumer soundbars that are out there. Now, the Nakamichi Soundwave soundbars, they sort of came to renown because a lot of them came with dual subwoofers, which is pretty unusual for soundbars coming with dual subs, but a lot of the Nakamichi Soundwave models do. They also come with wireless, physically detached surround speakers, sometimes as many as 4 of them. So, they have like a 11...
You don't have to connect them, though.
Like an 11.2.4 setup where there actually are drivers for all of those channels. Like those actually exist. But they have one which is the soundbar up front, comes with a wireless pair of surrounds. They don't have any of the Shockwave models that don't come with any wireless surrounds in the box, and a single subwoofer. Again, they don't sell any that don't come with at least a single subwoofer and 1 pair of wireless surrounds in the box. But for $780, you can get one of those Nakamichi Shockwave soundbars, and that is, as far as consumer soundbars go, the loudest. They hit about 106 decibels in terms of maximum output.
Let's just paint the picture here, because I had to scroll down to see the image.
Yeah.
Now, I was thinking, as probably many of you are, that this tub is like across the room from the TV. Mm-hmm. That is not the case. Okay, nope. So it's dual vanity, right? So dual sinks.
But split.
And then in between the dual sinks is like an island that comes out that has the TV right near where the mirror would be for the dual sinks, and then like inches in front of that TV is where the tub starts.
That's right.
Okay, it is very close. So this soundbar that it looks like is that just a base? I don't know what's underneath there. But he'd be putting the soundbar, I was thinking, you just need to move whatever it is closer. It's already close. It is not far away.
And nothing's moving.
Yes. So, my first thought when I thought about this was like, oh, well, just get some standalone speakers, like powered speakers, and just move them closer, and then you'll have, or put, install in-ceiling speakers right above the tub. But he's sitting so close. I mean, I don't think in-ceiling speakers would be even closer than what they currently are, right? No, these things are only right. Like if you were lying down or sitting down, really, because this is that kind of tub, you would be the sound bar is inches from your feet anyways. This is pretty close, so it's not more than 2 meters away. So it must be a very loud tub. I'm
sure.
When you get your hair cut and like there's hairs in your shirt. That's what my shirt feels like now. It's driving me. If you're wondering why I'm scratching like crazy,
you need some fabric softener.
Fabric softener. Go on.
Just to carry on in terms of what are other loud sound bars, Sennheiser's Ambio sound bars are up there. They're around the 105 decibel mark, so maybe 1 decibel shy of what the Nakamichi Shockwave can do. But like the Plus, which is more like a 104 type of decibels max output, it's $1,500. So it's twice the price of the Nakamichi Shockwave that I just mentioned. And in the case of the Sennheiser Ambios, those do not come with any subwoofer or other speakers. That is just the bar. And there's the Ambio Soundbar Max, which is $2,500. And that one can match the output of the Nakamichi Shockwave, but obviously at a considerably higher price. So when he said, he's willing to spend if he needs to, but he would prefer the value, then the Nakamichi Shockwave comes out on top in terms of just being loud and pretty expensive, as soundbars go, but not absurdly expensive at $780. People will ask, what about Klipsch? Klipsch has a sound bar. They've got their Cinema 600. It isn't actually much louder than other soundbars from, Sony and Vizio and the rest of them. It can get up to about 102 or something like, 102, 103, but so can the Sonys and so can the Vizios, the top end ones. So at $450 there, it is, substantially quieter than what the Nakamichi is outputting. So just because it has the Klipsch name on that Cinema 600, it isn't their regular titanium tweeter in a horn. It's got a little bit of a waveguide, but it's just a soft dome tweeter, and it isn't significantly any louder. So my real answer, the thing that I want people to be aware of, exactly Tom already alluded to it, is there are self-powered bookshelf speakers that you can get that have HDMI inputs. Like one of the things, the ease of use that is desired, being able to just have that HDMI ARC port and connect things that way, and have, the HDMI CEC so that, pressing volume up and down on the TV's remote controls the soundbar instead, or in this case, the self-powered speakers with an HDMI connection. That's all the features that are being looked for. If you want loud and okay in terms of price, here I do think Klipsch has the solution, and that would be the 7s. They're powered speakers. They've got the 5s, the 7s, and the 9s. The 5s don't have an HDMI ARC port on them, but the 7s and the 9s do. The 9s are enormous. They are so big, they just physically would not fit into the space that we've seen in this image. There's absolutely nowhere to put them. The 7s are big, but I think if they were lying on their sides, they could just squeak under this TV, although you'd want to measure, because eyeballing it, I think they would fit on their sides, certainly not standing up, but they could. But I want most other people, because we actually kind of already know the end of this story that Tom's going to mention here in just a minute, but the 7s are very, very big. But yeah, for most people, if you're like, I want a solution in a large room, I do have space for a pair of very big bookshelf speakers instead of just a soundbar form factor, the 7s are up there at, like 112 or something decibels output. Like, they're significantly louder than anything else you can get. They're $1,300 a pair for the 7s. They are not inexpensive. But in terms of just getting something that can play crazy loud and has that HDMI ARC input, Klipsch's the 7s are way, way up there.
Okay. I am about to get, I think, in for review, the new Monolith MTM 100.
Okay.
Speakers.
They big. They also big.
$500. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's going to be a review of those coming in, but they have like side-firing woofers, and
yeah.
It's just, they're ludicrously large. So yes, they would have to live on your vanity, essentially.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm not sure you're really willing to do.
Indeed,
and I don't blame you for not wanting to do it. Anyways, so Robert already emailed him a response, and we already have an update from Ron. He bought the Nakamichi and can confirm it is much louder than either the Sonos Beam or the HomePod mini speakers. He's well aware of how compromised the setup is, but for a bathroom, it is what it is. This is one of the few times where I would say, you know what, my man, why don't you consider putting some absorption on the ceiling?
Yeah.
That's about the only place in the bathroom where it might not look totally
and even then,
stupid.
you're going to get a lot of moisture going up there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's a little iffy.
Yeah. So the new soundbar is definitely better, definitely sounded better with its wireless sub paired to it. So he found a space in the bathroom closet where the subwoofer can go and still be heard. It's far from ideal, but sounds about as good as it can given all the compromises. So far, so good. So good. He's got it and it's working, and that's fine. It was $750, $780. So
that's right.
Could be worse.
It's a pretty penny, but yeah, to get anything that matches it, you're spending well more than that. So I think that was the top value. And hey, he's happy so far. That's the best we can do.
Yeah, that's what we got. The Lit Lion, who is really just a bunch of mice in a trench coat with a funny hat on. This person's got a Sony DN1080 receiver, which can power 5.1.2 configuration using either top, middle, top, front heights, or front or surround Dolby upward firing speakers for the overhead sounds. They're using Atmos modules placed on top of their left and right towers, so they selected 5.1.2 front Dolby configuration, which the diagram in the menu displays as the proper setup.
Mm-hmm.
They noticed that if you play the Blu-ray disc with DTS HD Master Audio and DTS Neural X is applied for upmixing, no sound comes out of the Atmos modules. This is an older receiver? It's an older receiver.
It's a little bit older at this point. Yeah.
Checking Sony's product page, it says that using the 5.1.2 front height configuration will work. And indeed, sound comes out of the Atmos modules using that setup in the menu. But of course, the diagram shown no longer matches what the real-world speaker layout looks like. Is this because DTS Neural X wouldn't sound right if it used upward-firing Atmos modules? They've tried to find info on this, but to no avail. So, yeah, I think I remember us talking about this many moons ago when this first came out.
I mean, this isn't universal across, DTS:X, DTS Neural X, Dolby Atmos, Dolby Surround. This isn't inherent to those
would
formats.
Upmix it and some would not, and all of that. And if it were me, I don't think I'd care that the little diagram wasn't right. I mean, I know that there's an EQ that's applied.
Some supposed EQ being applied,
when
to the
you tell it,
firing.
it's the upward firing ones.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that it's so imperative to have that EQ applied.
Yeah.
I would just switch it to tell it you have front height speakers and
sure.
go on with yourself.
I mean, that is basically the only option. In the manual I'm showing on screen, you can see it in the Flickr album. If you look beside the Neural X and the height speakers, there's a little footnote there. And the footnote down at the bottom tells you no sound is output when these speakers, the height speakers they're referring to, when the speaker pattern is set to 5.1.2 using top middles, front Dolby, or surround Dolby, meaning the only available option left is 5.1.2 front height. That is the only other option that exists in the setup of this AV receiver. So they could have simplified that. They could have said only works with front height as opposed to saying no sound works with any of the other three. It's a bit weird in terms of language, but it is right there. It's right there in the manual telling you, yeah, if you try to use DTS Neural X upmixing and you've configured your thing to say that you have top middles, front Dolby, or surround Dolby, there's no sound coming out of those height speakers when you're using Neural X, but there will be if you set it to front height. So, I mean, there's nothing else to be done.
Right.
You know,
you can't argue with it.
No. It's not that you missed a setting, it's nothing like that, or that you plugged things in wrong or anything like that. You did everything correct. When you use the Dolby Surround up mixer on Dolby content, it'll work with any of those. It'll work whether you have them set to front height or front Dolby. It's going to work. Yes, the supposed bit of EQ that's being applied to the upward firing modules, when you set it to either front Dolby or surround Dolby, you're not going to have that supposed, I think, dubious EQ being applied to it anymore. But if you're just like, yeah, I want sound to come out of all 7 of my speakers, your only option is to set it to 5.1.2 with front heights. And
you can always do like a test with something that's Dolby, right?
Yeah,
so get something that's Dolby where you know that you notice the height information, which good luck finding that. But say you do, then switch between the different configurations and see if you really notice that big of a difference between it being set as front height and as it being set as upward firing. Because I'm willing to bet that it's not that big of a difference, but it might be. It could be. Sure. It could be. So again, you have no choice if you want to.
You have no choice in this one. This one, you're just limited by what the thing lets
either
you do.
Just give up those speakers working during DTS, you do the other configuration.
Yep.
Bill says there's a chance we've saved his life.
Saying there's a chance.
I mean,
we're
she
heroes.
Who shall not be named saved my life from being trapped in my bedroom for.
That's right.
maybe minutes, if not an hour. I mean, that's a long time. I've got a lot of things to do. So, Bill, you and I have both had near-death experiences or something. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't read the rest of this question yet. He has a long daily commute, about 60 minutes each way, and though it's through a mountain pass, often with fog and sometimes snow. It sounds like you should move. Just move someplace.
So easy.
Things. just don't live there anymore. Years ago, he started driving more quickly and aggressively, just out of frustration and boredom. Thankfully, he never had an accident, but it's easy to imagine how he could have. Finding our podcast helped him mellow out a bit, so he and his family are grateful. That's good.
It is good.
He considers himself a longtime audiophile, starting in the late 80s with car audio. He can relate to Tom's humor, having raised 3 kids of his own, and he's an IT systems architect by trade, so he also appreciates our willingness to dig into the details, and by us, he means Rob. He's shared nearly all of our opinions that don't always line up with the more esoteric members of the audiophile community, so he was glad to find kindred spirits. Just before we get to his question, though, he put together his own movie server solution using an NVIDIA Shield TV Pro and MB as a software solution. Being an IT professional, he overdid it. No. When it comes to the network attached storage, he used old enterprise hardware with half a petabyte of storage and a clustered hypervisor solution for zero downtime. He made some of those words up. Those are not real words. He made them up.
I don't actually know what a clustered hypervisor solution is. I will fully admit I do not know what that is. I copied that verbatim.
He's just making stuff up and seeing if we'll read on the podcast, and the answer is yes.
That one I will. I'm not going to question it.
Naturally, he uses a network tuner for broadcast TV as well. Naturally, don't be ridiculous.
I mean,
and he shared a few photos of his network setup. Now, this is all just wire porn. For those of you that want to go to the Flickr album or to the YouTube channel. But it's very nice
wire management porn.
This is all this is he's just flexing. He's just flexing the fact that he's got the ability to terminate his own cables and you don't. you plebeian.
Absolutely. I don't mind one little bit. I'm very happy to share.
I don't
this.
even know what I'm looking at on the front. When I look at the front of these things, I go, what is this thing? Is this? I think the bottom of it. It looks like it might be one of those battery backup things.
Oh, it could be a battery backup or a fan. I'm pretty sure directly above the very bottom are the hard drives. Those look like the hard drives.
And then above that, I think, are just spacers or fans.
Right.
And then what's above that?
I've got to run one quick sec. I'll be right back. You keep talking.
Okay, whatever. That sounds like me. It looks like above that, maybe, I don't know, your fuse box, and then more, I don't know. It's very question. Anyways, to his question. Bill and his wife are shopping for a new house, but the timeline is unknown. So, for the time being, he continues to use his home office as the home theater. His room is 15 by 13.5. And there's a bump out for the closet in the right rear corner. He's 15 wide by 13.5 long. So he's looking on the long wall there. The right rear corner is a bump out for a closet. It's fully enclosed and light controlled. He's been getting by with an ancient 46-inch Sony HX909. He's completed his audio upgrades for now. 7.2.6 configuration. Too many speakers.
I'll probably have to run again in a second here because there's a delivery just coming that I can't miss. Sorry, I didn't think it would come this early.
He's using a Denon X6700H dual SVS SB2000 subs, monolith Encore speakers for the floor level, and Polk OWM3s for the overhead. So now it's finally time to upgrade the display because he can't literally shoehorn any more speakers into this room. With a 7-foot viewing distance and just given the size and layout of the room, he decides he wants a 77-inch OLED. Price-wise, that's either the C2 LG or the Sony A80K. Okay, I want to ask Sony to stop putting like letters and then numbers that start with vowels. I know. It's very hard to do the A80.
It's tough to pronounce.
It's A80. It's hard to do. Anyways, so those will be just about right for price-wise. LG C2 or the Sony stupid one. There's also the LG G2 at a higher price point. He could stretch the budget a bit if it would be super worthwhile. The brand new G3 would be pushing the budget a bit too far right now. Should he stick to his budget, or would either of these G series models be well worth saving up for? He didn't mention anything about gaming. So there's that.
lower down, I'm pretty sure that he does, and it isn't a top priority as far as that goes.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about the G. We didn't talk about the G2. We talked about
we talked about a B2 versus an A2.
Right, and so he's talking about the C2, which is even better than both those. So
that's right. It's got the little bit more.
I think you're going to be fine. Just go with the C2.
Yeah. So I mean, the G2 did measure a little bit brighter than the C2. It had the heatsink on it that let it get a little bit brighter, but there wasn't a terribly large difference between the C2 and the G2. In years past, there was no difference in terms of picture quality, like going back to the C1 and the G1 or anything earlier. There was no difference at all in picture quality. Once we got to the C2 versus G2, the G2 was a little bit brighter. Now with the C3 versus G3, there's a significant difference. There's finally a very significant difference because the G3 has those micro lens array panels, whereas the C3 does not. So there's a sizable difference when you get to the G3. So my honest advice would be, look at the price of the C2 versus the G3. And if you're just like, well, that's just way too much, I'm just clearly not going to do that, then get the C2. That would be my advice, because that's where the real substantial and significant picture quality difference is, just in terms of sheer light output, thanks to that micro lens array. So that's where I would head. If you're not going to wait and save up for the G3, then I don't think the G2 is honestly worth paying a lot more for versus the C2. So those are the two ends of the spectrum, and I would go for either end of that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Between the C2 and the A80K, the online reviews seem to say that each has their strengths and weaknesses. He considers himself a bit of a perfectionist. So the minutiae are giving him some analysis paralysis. Would the differences really be only noticeable between the two OLEDs side by side? He isn't much of a gamer, so the LG's obvious advantages on that front are not a priority. Which OLED should he get? Well, we already told you which OLED you should get. And I cannot stress enough how many times we will say this and continue to say it, that just because somebody in a review said that there are one performs slightly, if they say the word slightly,
yes,
or anything other than like, obviously there's a problem with the black levels, or obviously there's a problem with the color, it's like noticeable, from my dog or whatever, you'd have to be side by side, and you're not going to be side by side. So let's put it this way: let's say you're like, oh well, I was going to get the C2 because you guys told me to get the C2, but then I saw the A80K, which is the last time I'm going to say that today, on sale,
right?
And I snapped it up before I heard your podcast. Should I return it? The answer is no.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I completely agree there. The differences are slight. Yeah. Like myself, if price doesn't factor into this, I would personally favor the C2 just a little bit. In terms of it does Dolby Vision correctly. Once in a while, there are issues with the Sonys and Dolby Vision still, whereas the LGs have always shown Dolby Vision just exactly the way Dolby Vision should be. They seem to be the only brand who is able to nail that down. So on Dolby Vision front, it has that. It does have the gaming advantages, but that's neither here nor there in your particular use case. They have a little bit more option when it comes to handling HDR. You can optionally activate their frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, which if you want to preserve highlight detail the most that you possibly can, it does a better job there with their frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, although it does simultaneously raise the black level, or raise the shadow detail, I should say, beyond what is actually, exactly nit for nit accurate when you do theirs. But LG's lets you turn that off if you want to and go right back to just regular tone mapping, not frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, whereas the Sony doesn't let you turn theirs off. They have their dynamic tone mapping on, and that's just the end of the story. So you better like what they do, because there's no option to turn it off. The LG gives you the option to turn it off. So if you're into the minutia, you've got a little bit more adjustability there with the LG than you do with the Sony. The Sony does raise that shadow detail up a little bit, so if you're really persnickety about that, then the LG has the advantage there. So all in all, I would say that I favor the LG just a slight little bit, but I completely agree with Tom. If you're like, oh, there's a $200 difference and the Sony's cheaper, and you got that one, you would never know it without having the LG side by side. So they're much closer than different.
Stefan is using Plex with a NAS solution for his movie backups. Pah! Says Bill.
You don't have half a petabyte.
Where's your petabyte?
Honestly, maybe he does. We don't actually know. Stefan might have even more storage than that.
It's an arms war. It's an arms race between Stefan and Bill on how much data they can store, and their cable management becomes like the stuff of legends. NAS solution, plebe.
Hardly.
Give them each other's email addresses and just see what happens. Just make sure we get BCC'd on everything.
I mean, Bill's is a NAS solution too. It is network attached storage.
In terms of the audio and video quality, would a Zappiti?
Zappiti. It's Zappiti.
There's too many P's in this. Zappiti player and system offering any advantages over Plex. Bill thinks that you should be using the thing that he uses, which I don't know what it's called.
Well, that's MB. That's just a different software.
See?
Very, very similar to Plex. But Zappiti
if you don't understand, if you're not an IT professional, then Plex is fine. But if you're, a little more advanced, God, dude, Bill is current. Like Stefan's over there, like typing in MB right now, getting like, what the heck is he talking about?
Well, it used to be Media Browser, and then they changed it just to MB, Media Browser, but then it became MB, EMBY. So they've done a play on their own name going along there. But anyway, you've almost got like the 3 levels to having like hard drive stored movies, right? You can back up all your movies as MKV files using Make MKV. and then play them back using either Plex or MB. So that's you doing a bunch of work because you're having to, at the very least, back up your discs using Make MKV. That takes some time, and usually having to go through some checklists, in the Make MKV software so that you get the backup exactly the way you want it with all the audio and subtitle and everything that you want exactly the way. And then you end up with individual MKV files, and you play those back through the software of your choice. Zappiti lets you actually do the backup process more easily because all you need is a full disk backup. You don't have to do the go through the checklist and convert it into an MKV. You can just say backup disk. Again, Make MKV software is still great to use that way, but you don't actually have to do any conversion. You just get a full BDMV file folder of the entire disk, everything just one for one, and then the Zappiti players will play that back just from that. They don't need any conversion to happen. So the backup process is a little simpler. You don't have to put as much manual effort into checking off exactly the components that you want. And then the playback is exactly the same as though you had put a physical disc in. You still get the FBI warning and the disc menus and all that stuff, all of which gets removed when you convert it to a MKV. But sometimes people want the disk menu, or they don't want to have individual MKV files for all the special features. They'd rather just have, okay, here's one folder, just point at that, and it's exactly like playing the physical disc. That's what Zappiti lets you do. Zappiti is also the superior solution because of that for 3D Blu-rays. If for some reason you're just playing 3D Blu-rays, that solution works better there because when you convert it to a 3D MKV, you lose half the resolution. So if you want to maintain full quality in terms of a 3D Blu-ray disc, Zappiti has the advantage there, being able to just back up the disc one for one and play it exactly like a physical disc. So then, of course, above that would be Kaleidoscape, where you're getting the full versions that they authored themselves and downloading it to hard drives. So even simpler, you're not doing any disc backups anymore there, and you're getting versions that were authored by Kaleidoscape themselves. So Zappiti sort of fits into the middle, and it fits into the middle of all of these price-wise as well. Their players are a couple of $1,000s, so they're not as expensive as the Kaleidoscape players, but they're much more expensive than an NVIDIA Shield. So all of these are you're trading money for time, and you have this choice with Zappiti falling right into the middle. In terms of, does it actually give you any audio-video quality advantage over converting to an MKV and playing with Plex or MB? No. It doesn't. It's a one-to-one backup of the disc. It's exactly the same as the disc. So is Plex or MB. It's just that there's one additional step where you're also converting the movie to an MKV file, but it doesn't lose any audio or video quality when you do that. So in terms of the actual video that you see and the audio that you hear, there's no difference at all between Zappiti versus Plex.
But everybody knows WAV files are the best, in case you wonder. WAV files are the best.
Sure.
Anything else is compressed. If we put price and value aside for a moment, do we actually prefer Audyssey when it comes to room correction? Or again, ignoring price as a factor, would we personally prefer one of the other room correction programs? Lately, he's been finding lots of people raving about Anthem's Arc Genesis, but is there really an audible difference?
I mean, by default, it is possible to hear a difference.
Yes. Okay. So, and I did write an article about this, and we have talked about it on the podcast. I will link up the article, but they're all they're using the same technologies. This is not that much different. The difference comes in the house curves that they default to.
Yeah, the default target curves.
The default target curve is slightly. It's like saying DTS upmixing is better than Dolby upmixing. Well, why? Well, because DTS mixes, when they do the upmixing or when they do anything, they put a little bit more bass, but when they do the upmixing, they will run the overheads a little bit hotter. Is that better? Well, if you like it, it's better. If it's not, if you don't like it, then you like Dolby better. And that's fine.
And you could manually turn up the trim levels on your overhead speakers using Dolby Surround, and then they'd be pretty darn similar. Right.
And the reality is they can all sound remarkably similar. And therefore, there's not a real reason to prefer one over the other unless there's other factors involved. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's like the factors would be basically like ease of use. that is a big factor, right? If you don't want to spend the time and dig into whatever interface you're using, then, being able to have a default that you don't have to mess with, that can mean a whole lot more. So yeah, you got the two sides of it. It's like, what are these systems capable of doing if you're willing to put in time and effort versus what do they just do by default? Which one is the easiest to run? Which one has the fewest headaches? Like, those can be factors too. So it's like, if I don't have any constraints on the price that I'm paying, and I don't mind either putting in a bunch of time myself or paying to bring in a calibrator, then I would probably choose Trinov myself.
Yeah, sure.
Like that, if we're saying, hey, price is not a factor and time or paying someone else to do it also not a factor, I would probably choose Trinov out of all of these, although I still have a little bit of hesitation to even say that because curves of equal loudness.
Yes.
I really want curves of equal loudness. So, I mean, honestly,
that's not really the question, though. The question is do these things... Is one significantly more powerful than another one, or is one sound significantly better than another one? Well, also,
though, just which do we personally prefer? So that's where I'm saying, okay, if nothing is a factor, then I'll probably go for a Trinov myself.
Well, and I take it from the perspective of ease of use more than Rob does. Like, I'm less willing to sit there and futz with a microphone and try to... Like, I think that Audyssey should be easier.
Sure.
Audyssey is by far the easiest of the group. Yes, Rob's right.
That still gives good results. Because there are ones that are even easier, but then the results are pretty darn poor. So we're trying to strike at least a balance where we're happy with the results and it's ezy to use.
So of the major ones, which is Drac, Audyssey, the Trinov one, Anthem, the Y-POW with the reflected room control, RSC, all that stuff. I would take Y-POW or Audyssey over as my top two. Okay. And generally Audyssey because I think that you can get it for cheaper. I don't know where Y-POW is falling these days in their lineup. But it's been their highest level, which is the one that would compete directly with Audyssey Multi-Q XT32 with sub HD or whatever the heck it's called. That tends to skew towards the higher price range, which may be where I end up anyways, just looking at the features that I want out of an AV receiver. And believe me, if I had to buy my next AV receiver, 5.2.2 is fine for me.
Okay. But then, you wouldn't get XT32 with that, right? Even in Denon Rant's lineup, then you're,
But then you know what I mean? So I might end up in that price range anyways.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about what I'm recommending Audyssey because it comes down faster in price in my memory, because I haven't done the research on it recently, but ease of use is very, very high. And then you got the curves of equal loudness, which are, everybody else, no one else has done it. At least done it right. As far as
Y-POW and Audyssey are the ones with curves of equal loudness built in. Those are the two that do it. And then, if you do want to, put a little bass boost in there, a little gradual rise in the bass or whatever, like the Audyssey editor app is inexpensive. That's almost not a consideration in terms of adding price for the editor app, and is pretty darn easy to use as long as you're happy with, not super fine detail, because you are just drawing it with your finger on, preferably an iPad, just because it's a little easier when the screen is bigger. So I think I personally, if it's just me, I would be completely capable of being exceedingly happy with an Arc Genesis system or a Dirac system, because I will at least once put the time in to dial that thing in the way I want, and I'm capable of figuring out how to do that with any of these systems. And
but there's nobody in Rob's apartment that's running around moving stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've got people moving stuff, including dogs, constantly.
But if I'm factoring ease of use into it, I think I would go for Audyssey. That's what I would do, because I probably do want to put a little bit of my own tuning in there, not just the absolute default curve, but doing so is quite easy. All I need is the editor app. I don't even need Multi-Q-X, So I think that's where I would land. But price, no object. Payment, no object. Time, no object. I'd go with a Trinov.
Again, but if your question is which one is the most powerful or whatever, I think that it's a wash. they're all going
to pretty darn close.
They pretty much at the end are going to be sonically indistinguishable from each other if you put in the same.
If you do a little bit of target curve manipulation on your own,
Yes. So he's decided to get some per listen speakers for his front three. The S series is way too expensive, so he'll be going with the R series, and they still sound utterly amazing, he says. But from his experience, he cannot justify the price point of per listen speakers for the surround and other positions, so he was considering Upfiring's Novus Slim on-wall speakers. Would they pair well? Are there other slim on-wall speakers around the same price point, which is $450 each? Or or that we think would be a better match to the per listen fronts? I haven't looked at the per listen speakers for a long time, so I don't know what these things
are. Well, I mean, they are ruler flat. They are wide, even dispersion. I mean, they really hit all the things that Harman has ever said that a speaker should be. I mean, they really, really do it. They are absolutely ruler flat. High power handling. I remember these
speakers. These are interesting looking. Everything looks like it's got a waveguide on it, but it's not really.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they do. On the tweeter, they've got a bit of a waveguide, and then it's combined with a dedicated mid-range driver. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of the per listen speakers. And I mean, like I say, because they are just ruler flat, wide, even dispersion, other speakers that match that will not be worlds apart in terms of getting a half-decent timbre match, especially if you're talking about your front heights or your surround backs or something like that. So, I mean, AVRant in general targets a pretty darn neutral, linear, tell it like it is type of a thing. They're not trying to go for any strange characteristic sound. So I don't think you would have any big problem having the Novus speakers. My only thing there is, like, I will sometimes say, okay, my surround speakers that are to my sides, I might go a little bit higher with those. The surround backs, I don't care about. The heights, I don't care about. I would easily pair up the Novus on walls in those positions. The surrounds, I don't know, maybe I'd want to audition the surrounds. I'll put it that way. If you're buying per listen speakers, your dealer should be able to let you audition what it sounds like with different surrounds versus per listen surrounds that would match, and you see if you can tell any worthwhile difference there. So I can just mention some alternatives that I think would also be a pretty good match. Very similar price point, just a touch more expensive would be Revel's Concerta 2 surrounds. Those are surround speaker mounts on the wall, looks like sconce on your wall, and those go for $495 each. And those are ruler flat. Revel, part of the Harman group, has that same Harman target curve, very, very flat, tell it like it is, wide, even dispersion. So pretty darn close in price there. So the Revel Concerta 2s, I think, would be an option that might work for you here. Focal has their Cora surrounds, which are only $300 each. So if you actually need to go down in price, Focal's target is, again, pretty darn close. They don't have quite the same power handling, though. So that would be something to look at. If you're in a fairly narrow room and your surrounds are going to be pretty close to you on the side walls, that's not going to be an issue. But if you're in a considerably larger room, I don't know what your room is like, then just be aware that the Focal Coras don't have the same kind of power handling as
ports on the bottom of them, huh?
The per listens?
Yeah.
They got ports.
Kind of a weird port situation going on there. It doesn't front firing, side and back firing. It must fire down into the bottom.
It fires down, yeah, and then they've got a sort of like a heel.
I'm looking at the LCR basically.
Yeah,
which I imagine is probably what he's looking at. These things are like ridiculous. Like they play so low. Like,
I know.
Why do they?
They're very, very capable speakers.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want speakers that I would say, okay, these are pretty much getting to be just on par with the per listens, but not quite as expensive as the per listen R series, then like Focal's 300 series on walls, those are $1,000 each. Okay, we're getting pretty spendy, but that would be one. Or slightly less expensive than that, Ascend Acoustics Sierra Duo. LCR version. Those are $850 each. There I'm trying to get you something that can have sort of similar power handling and then very similar, ruler flat linear response, nice wide dispersion. So, Ascend's Sierra Duo, $850 each, or Focal's 300 series on walls at $1,000 each. Those are there. So those don't match the similar price point to the Upfirians. They're double the price of the Upfirians, or getting pretty close to it. But those would be ones where I'm like, okay, if the Upfirians in an audition don't quite live up to the per listens, but you don't want to get all the way to the per listens surround price point, then maybe consider one of those.
Yeah, with flat speakers, you'll be surprised how well they match
forgiving.
with things. And especially, and I know Rob's like, well, I don't know about this. The surround backs and the overheads doesn't matter. I agree with that.
Easily.
I would also extend that to the surrounds.
I know.
I think that it's going to be extremely hard to notice with actual content that there's a difference in the timbre matching.
I'm just like someone who's going for pearlescent speakers. Maybe they're going to be picky enough. Like I'm.
There's a huge difference between being picky enough and actually hearing a difference.
Oh, I know.
Because I think picky enough has to do with looking at specs and thinking about it. In fact, Andrew.
I gave a range there. Honestly, my pick probably would be the Revels. Okay, the Concerta 2s, $495 each. They're a little bit more expensive than the Hyperions that you were looking at, but yeah, those would probably be my pick if I had to choose one.
Andrew also wrote an article recently that published on AV Gadgets: planning versus experimentation in the home theater.
Sure.
And this is the argument this article is making. There's a lot of planning you can do that drives you absolutely bonkers until you test it out and you're like, it doesn't really make any difference. What was I worrying about? And I if it were me, I would look at this. I would look at all the suggestions Rob had.
Sure.
Okay. I would find the ones that, like, I don't like the way these look. I don't like the way these mount. Absolutely. I don't like anything about it. Throw all those away and then take the cheapest one and order it.
Okay.
And then see what happens. And even then, I might consider just going with something else that was even cheaper, that looked right. Simply because I think that even though first of all, you are the only person that's going to know that there's a massive price difference between the front speakers and the rest of your speakers.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Most people come into my home theater and cannot point out the speakers. Mm-hmm. Like, they can't tell what a speaker is and what's a room treatment. It all looks the same to them. They have no idea.
They're black
So that's going to be the case here too. So just don't overthink it. Try it out and and start with the cheapest one. And just, even if you have to pay return shipping or whatever, who cares? You're buying this thing once.
That's right.
And people are like, oh my God, it's $1,000 for a speaker. How much was your phone? And how many phones have you had in the last couple of years? Oh, I didn't pay anything for my phone. It was free with my plan.
You weren't getting 13 of them.
It wasn't free with your plan. You paid for it through your plan. So how much was your phone? Because believe me, Apple got their money. Mm-hmm. So you spent $1,000 a year on phones. And you're like, oh, I don't want to spend $1,000 on a speaker that I'm going to own for probably the rest of my life.
Yep. Good way to look at it.
Chad appreciated our answers last week regarding switching from Audyssey and paying for DRAC on his Marantz. Do both of us actually agree that he should just stick with Audyssey? Yeah. I think that's pretty much the consensus here. Andrew agrees too, so that's a third vote. If he wants to implement the Harman target curve, can he just do this using the Audyssey editor app, or would he need to pay for Audyssey Multi-Q X? Just go like this.
Yep.
Yeah,
you can do it on the editor app.
You can do it on the editor app.
Yeah, you can do it there.
Listen, the couple of dB difference that you're going to maybe be able to do with typing it in manually or doing it with a slider or with your mouse is not going to be that. Buy an iPad or something. I
saw one guy complaining. This was like on a YouTube video. He's like, the Audyssey editor app doesn't let you set the target curve that you want to, because all he did is he touched his finger to it once and tried to drag his finger to draw the curve.
Oh, draw the line? Yeah.
And he's like, see, you can only make one change. I'm like, you literally never tried lifting your finger and touching it a second time, because you could, like, it's working in points and then it like fills in whatever you raised on its own. He thought the only way you could do it was by drawing. So look, if that's just remember, then you're going to find it difficult.
There's people that return AV receivers and stereos and everything else every single day because they don't work, when in fact the volume was just too low.
Sure.
And they did not turn the volume up. Okay? I've done that. And I'm sure some of you have as well. I've returned a perfectly good DVD player because discs had that layer skip thing, and it would hit that layer thing and it would be a pause, and it drove me nuts, and I thought it was a DVD player. This was way, 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 way back.
Oh, right.
Okay, if it's a matter of paying for either DRAC or Multi-QX, how does that comparison play out? And just as a potentially pertinent aside, he's in a dedicated room with 4 subwoofers positioned at the quarter wall marks on the front and back walls, just in case that plays into either room correction program how they handle subwoofers in the bass.
So you have a setup where you're just sending mono bass, and you don't have to think beyond that.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it's not even an option in the Denon and Marantzes right now to go to Dirac Live bass management. They're not even offering it.
Right.
They do have plans to offer it in the future, but it's not that you can get it today. But you, with the setup you described, you don't even have to think about it. You just send a mono signal to all 4 of your subs, and you've positioned them ideally in a dedicated rectangular room. So you are A-OK as far as that goes. So, I mean, that just further cements my idea that you really don't need to pay any extra money except for the editor app. Go ahead and pay the $20 or $25 for the editor app. I think you'll get use out of that since you very much want to try out the Harman target curve. Happily, with the new Marantz that you have, you can try the default target curve of Audyssey saved into speaker preset 1, and then try your manually set Harman target curve in speaker preset number 2, and you can A/B compare those things. So there's even more that you can do there. So yeah, I don't think you need to spend more than whatever the editor app costs wherever you live. I think that's all you need.
Yeah.
And lift your finger more than once when you're drawing the target.
Don't be dumb. It's, okay. I cannot tell you how many reviews I've written and then gone back and gone, oh, wait, that was dumb. I should have tried this. And I go back and change the review. You know what I don't do? And this has everything to do with trying to get first to the YouTube or first to whatever. And my reviews sit for at least a week before I publish them. Well, let's not say a week. They used to sit for longer than that, but now they sit for 3 or 4 days, so that if I run into, because invariably I'm going to run into issues, or I'm going to keep experimenting with the things I had problems with.
Find something. Yep.
And I'll find. I had this one set of headphones that were so bizarre. I can't remember which ones they are, but if you left one in and put the other one down on the counter and walked away, you would lose connection to your phone, even though your phone was in your pocket. And but if you did it with the other one, it was fine the entire time. So it seemed like the phone was connecting to one earbud, but not the other one. And then the earbuds would connect to each other because they assumed they would never be that far apart, which was not the case because I was cleaning the house and talking to my wife at the same time. So weird stuff like that shows up, and you can't always just assume that you're going to figure all this stuff up right away. So this person who did this review, whichever one that Rob's talking about, clearly was just like, I'm going to try it. Boom, I'm going to post it as fast as possible and try to get the clicks. And this is the price you pay for.
It was also titled like Why You Shouldn't Use Audyssey. So I think they had an agenda.
It almost seems like negative headlines get more clicks.
There you go.
No matter how terrible the information. Don't worry, Reddit has been repeating it for months. David, despite our advice to just power his 6 overhead speakers with the built-in amps of his X6700H receiver, David still wants to get external amplification. No. No, we're not. No, I'm sorry. No. He already has his 7-channel monolith amp for his floor-level speakers. He's seen the Pyle PT8000 8-channel distribution amp available for as little as $160. At that price, it's even less expensive than getting 3 of the stereo Fosse amps. Would the Pyle be a good solution? Or speaking of Fosse stereo amps, what about their even less expensive V1.0B or V1.02G models as compared to the TDA 7498 that we always recommend?
So I'll do the last one first, just because the Fosse V1 amps, they're 25 watts a channel, which that's getting a little questionable to me. Like you're in a room that's big enough to have a 13 speaker setup. I'm not sure I'd go with a 25 watt per channel amp, even for the overhead speakers. It's probably almost certainly fine for your top middles. But if you got like front heights, there's a chance that those are far enough away that 25 watts, it's getting a little questionable there. Given that it's a $20 difference between the Fosse V1 versus the TDA 7498, and that one's an 80 watt per channel amplifier in there, like that's that's enough of a difference for only $20 that I'd say, yeah, spend the $20 extra and get the 7498. So as far as that one goes, if you're sticking with the Fossies, I still stick by our original recommendation there. It's a substantial difference that's going on there. When it comes to the Pyle, like, it's got a fan. That's the only thing I question about it. It's got a fan in it. It's got an active fan going
on the side on it.
Yeah. So I mean, if your amplification is placed, this is 100 watts times 8, so it's pretty darn capable. So I don't have any qualms about there. The price on it is fantastic. If you find it, that's not the normal retail price. The normal retail price is well over $350, $400.
$640.
Yeah, MSRP is way up there, and then normally it's, you finding it for $350, $400. So where you're finding for $160, I'm not sure. Maybe that's renewed or refurbished or something like that. But just in terms of specs, totally fine. But I probably wouldn't want to use it if I have all of my equipment in my home theater with me in a place where I could hear that fan going. If it's in an equipment rack, it's in another room, something like that, I'd be totally fine with it.
Or not, or just not do that.
Or just, use the amps that are built into your X6700H, which remains my real answer. But seems like he's dead set on doing this. So in terms of specs, it's fine. I just want to be aware of that fan.
It boggles, to a certain extent, it boggles my mind that people will insist on getting something asking our advice and then saying, yeah, I know what you said, but if I'm going to do it anyways, how should I do it? I don't care. I mean, do it however you want.
He really wants to put that X6700H into preamp only mode. He really wants to do that.
That's fine, but if you're going to do it, if you are going to do this because you insist on doing it, which is fine, I really couldn't care less about whether or not you do this, which means I care a little bit because I really think you shouldn't. But then why do it halfway? Why sit there and try to cheap out and get these absolute garbage? No offense. These amps are fine for what you need. But from your perspective, why get these garbage amps? Why try to save?
I mean, actually, the amps that are built into the 6700H are better than any of these.
Way better than all of these. way better than all of these. So if you're not going to upgrade, what are you doing it for? Just so you can go into preamp mode? No.
You can do preamp mode. Yeah.
You need to just get the good ones. Just get more of the monoliths is what you need.
Oh, you could.
That's what you should do because you've already done it.
You could certainly get Emotivas, which might be a little bit less because you don't need the 200 watts per channel for the 6 overheads.
Why downgrade?
So
why downgrade? I mean, I know people are like, oh, he's just being funny and mean, which I am being mean, but I'm also being honest. Why would you downgrade? Why would you decide to get external amplification that's worse than the amplification that's in your AV receiver? Well, don't do it.
But I mean, an Emotiva Base X wouldn't be a downgrade to the
go ahead and get that.
That would
get a dedicated, get a real home theater amplifier that's going to be better than what's inside your.
There you go.
Your AV
If you're going to do it, spend it.
I don't think you should get any of this nonsense. Any of this crap. None of the Fossies, none of the Pyles. Just get good stuff.
Okay.
There you go. That's my. If you're gonna not listen to us, not listen to us all the way. Eric has a Denon X3700H receiver, and he's using all 9 of its built-in amps to power his 5 floor-level speakers and 4 overhead speakers. He wants to add a pair of speakers to play music out in the backyard. They won't be used all that often, so is there an easy way to keep them plugged into the Denon, some sort of Zone 2 solution, or would he need to unplug a pair of his theater speakers every time he wants to use the backyard speakers if he doesn't want to buy any extra amplifiers? I mean, I have to look at the back of this AV receiver. Is there like a speaker B output? Because that's what you would be looking for.
Yeah, so it does, like if you just count the number of speaker binding posts on the back of the X3700H, there are 11 pairs versus just, 9 amplifiers that it has built in, because it does have the 7, including surround backs, and then it has 2 pairs of height speakers, height 1 and height 2. So it gives you the ability to physically plug in 11 speakers to the X3700H. It can only power 9 of them itself at any given time. But the only options for which of those binding posts power Zone 2 is one of the height channels. It won't let you, it doesn't make the surround backs also assignable, which unfortunately, that would have just worked if it had that ability. Right. This actually, because he doesn't have surround backs in his theater. But unfortunately, the Zone 2 has to come out of one of the height binding posts. So there's no way to leave your speakers just plugged, including the backyard speakers. physically plugged into the Denon at all times. I mean, you could do the very simple thing of you actually just unplug your front, left, and right speakers and plug in the backyard speakers. But I'm betting maybe he wants to play what's inside as well as, do that outside as well. So then you would just unplug one of those height ones, reassign the heights to zone 2, and play things that way. But it would involve physically unplugging. You could, of course, connect an inexpensive Fosse 2-channel amplifier to the zone 2 pre-outs.
But we don't know how loud he wants it in the backyard. In the backyard,
that's right.
That can require a lot of power to get any sort of volume out there.
That could potentially, yeah. So, and that would involve buying at least a 2-channel amplifier to use the zone 2 pre-outs. But if you don't want to have any unplugging and plugging in, then it would require, in this case, that you do buy a 2-channel amplifier. The only other thing you could do is only run one pair of height speakers in your theater at all times.
What about a speaker selector switch from the front, right, and left? And then he could...
sure.
But again, you would not be able to play inside and outside at the same time. You would have to choose one.
You would have to choose. And it would involve buying the switch.
Right.
And it's not as simple as a... source selector switch, because you're talking about the amplified signal being changed. So that is a true speaker selector switch that you'd have to get there. So
you have to put your AV receiver into 2-channel mode, stereo or something like that, and then you would have to.
So if this is I really only do this once in a while, what I would choose to do is unplug my height speakers, reassign them as zone 2, and plug in my backyard speakers when I'm going to rarely use my backyard speakers. That would costs you nothing, just a little bit of hassle to unplug one pair of height speakers and plug in the backyard speakers instead.
All right. Brian is too many, so let's go to Jack.
Let's skip him and do Jack's last.
Jack last. Jack says, when we were discussing the very large home theater in Australia last week, don't remember that, Joseph's Theater, whoever that is, we recommended JTR speakers and also top-end studio monitor speakers from JBL. Okay, that's now starting to sound familiar.
Yeah, I remember talking about JTR at least, right?
That started the wheels turning in Jack's mind because he's come across quite a few people online lately who are infatuated with the idea of using JBL's professional commercial cinema speakers in their homes. Jack has taken a peek. They are big. They are ugly. They are obviously unnecessary for most home theaters, but for a very large home cinema like Joseph's, would they make sense? What are our thoughts on using commercial cinema speakers in large homes? Might they actually be a less expensive solution? So I want you to understand that this is coming from not a place of research. I have not researched this or looked into it at all as far as how I think that this would actually sound in your home. There's a reason, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, there's a reason why we don't recommend using computer speakers or desktop speakers in your home theater. And the reason is that they are not really designed with a seating distance involved that you have in your home theater. Your computer speakers are assuming that you're within like arm's reach of them, and they resolve themselves best. They are tested in that. If they sound good in the home theater, well, that was incidental. That they didn't do that on purpose. But generally speaking, they are meant to be in a room or in a seating distance of a certain amount. Same thing with cinema speakers, in my mind. They are designed with, hugely wide dispersion because they need to they have a huge seating area in front of them. They may even be designed with the idea that you're going to be putting multiple of them near each other in order to get the output that you need for such a large room. And then they are designed with the idea that the seating, the best spot is like way far away. It's not the front seats. It's way far away where you're going to get the best sound. So when you put all those things together, I would be extremely hesitant. Like a large home theater room is not anywhere near the size of a movie theater.
Commercial cinema.
It's just, that's not even, we're just talking about square footage, not cubic feet when you start talking about the height, which is massive. So that would be my concern. There are speakers that are designed for home use that are extremely high output. And that's what I would be pointing, like the JTRs that we were talking about.
Like the JTRs or like those top-end studio monitor speakers. They basically fit the bill perfectly. Now, there's the other side of it, which is the associated equipment. What is driving these speakers.
Yes.
Because one of the things with the JBL commercial speakers is they don't have any crossovers built into them.
Mm-hmm.
They are designed to be bi-amped or tri-amped using their own JBL Professional or Crown amplifiers that have all the filtering built in on the amplification side. Now, could you use that at home? Yes, you could. But in the case of Joseph, he already had his Trinnov system and his Trinnov amplifiers there with no intention of replacing those, which means he wants speakers that have a crossover built into them and will hit the levels that he needs to with 200 watts, RMS or 400 watt peaks. Like that was already there in place. So I was recommending speakers that will work with what he already has. If he was changing everything, could he switch over to commercial JBL speakers? I mean, you could.
I think it's even more than that, though, too, because a lot of times those professional speakers, the commercial speakers, they don't have. No speaker has a perfectly flat impedance, graph, right?
Sure.
A lot of times they are meant to be. You're meant to look at that graph and then look at the impedance output of an amplifier.
Well, I mean, they
and
have
match
their
them up.
Yeah, they're Crown amplifiers. Like I say, Crown, if you look at their lineup, why do they have so many SKUs?
Right.
When, the actual wattage out of them appears
Exactly
to be the same if that's all you're looking at. Well, they actually tell you, like, no, these amps are designed to work with these professional speakers.
Yeah.
Because they have the filtering built into the amplifier. They have the correct impedance curve. Like, it's all matched up. It's all nicey nice. So if you look at, okay, I could buy just the front speakers, and it appears as though the commercial cinema JBL speakers with the 103 decibel efficiency are actually less expensive than those top flight studio monitors that Rob recommended. I mean, isn't that the less expensive solution? You forgot about the amplifiers that have to go along with them. Yeah. That's part of the package. You really can't separate them because, like I say, you got to have the crossover. That's not built into those. Like, you're just getting the drivers and the cabinets. You don't have any of the internals. All of that has been, shelved out to the amplifiers that are meant to go along with them. And like I say, he already had his amplitude amplifiers in place, no intention of replacing them. So you have to look at the entirety of what is being installed here. The other side of it is, it isn't so easy as a homeowner to obtain those cinema speakers. You have to go through different purchasing channels to get the commercial cinema speakers than you do for the studio monitor speakers. The studio monitor speakers, you're not going to find them at a Best Buy.
I'm going to argue, too, they're going to be so large that getting stereo separation, much less fitting a center channel between them.
The cinema speakers come in separate pieces. Like the speaker itself comes in individual pieces. That's how it gets delivered. So there's a lot to consider there. So, I mean, is there ever going to be a home cinema where I would say from the ground up, the best solution might be JBL's commercial cinema speakers? That is possible. There's the possibility that from the ground up, that's the solution you're building. The home cinema is so large that that's really what makes the most sense and financially makes the most sense. Yeah, that's conceivable. I'm not going to say you should never, ever do it. But it's just when we do have other already existing associated equipment, when we know the seating distance and regular consumer speakers, not sensitive enough, not high enough power handling to get you there. But we have speakers that fit the bill. I'm not going to be like, well, let's tear apart the entire thing and put in commercial cinema speakers because some guys on AVS Forum are really over the moon about them. So,
yeah. And these people who are all over the moon about them either got them somehow because a movie theater near them shut down just were like basically giving them away. Or they're just looking at specs and going, well, if it's good enough for a movie theater and that's what we're trying to emulate, then we should have the exact speakers that they have, which is not true because of the complete... I mean, the mixing studios don't have that. Your editing studio doesn't have that.
Yeah.
They're not mixing
Even
on
the
those
dubbing
things.
stages don't usually use those. They use the studio monitors.
Yeah. All right. So who do we have left? We have one left, right?
Brian there. Brian is on the list and will be first up next week.
All right. We'll thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Chad for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 137 patrons over at patreon.com, including Bill. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. Chad, thank you so much for the PayPal donation, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 137 patrons over there. Bill, thank you for being one of them.
So thank Greg for sending Rob a box of spiders.
Yes, Greg, I'm looking forward to getting that Harmony Hub and whatever the heck else has been thrown in there. Surprise, surprise.
Scorpions, probably. We also got some notes of gratitude from the Lit Lion, Bill, Stefan, Gurinder, David, Eric, Karl, Ron, and Brian. Thank you very much for thanking us.
I shall say the names one more time. The Lit Lion, Bill, Stefan, Gurinder, David, Eric, Karl, Ron, and Brian. Thank you all very much for your notes of gratitude. They're very much appreciated. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.